The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply. USAA.
Hi, I'm Travis Walton, author of Fire in the Sky, and my experience as an abductee back in 1975. And you are listening to the Dr. Sky Show.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the exciting show that you tell us you like so much, the Dr. Sky Show, with great guests from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, and weather, and celebrity guests in the mix. The radio show, the Dr. Sky Show, has been in existence well over 10 years. And in that time, we've had well over 500 interesting guests from these realms. But first, I'd like to thank our producer extraordinaire, Richard Dugan of radio station KZSB, that's AM 1290 in Santa Barbara, California. Today, ladies and gentlemen, an outstanding guest. The author of Fire in the Sky, the Walton Experience, the best documented case of alien abduction ever recorded. And the reason that this host, Steve Cates, Dr. Sky, is not going into a lengthy introduction of our special guest by bio, he is well known not only in the UFO community, but in the world community of an event that happened. And ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege and honor to welcome Travis Walton, who I recently had the honor of meeting at a very special event from my participation in the Coast to Coast AM radio show with George Norrie. Travis Walton was one of the esteemed guests on stage in a UFO conference and conversational discussion. Travis, welcome to the radio show today. It was an honor meeting you there, and I hope the same feeling was there from you too.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Sky. It's great to be with you.
Absolutely, sir. You know, I want to put this whole book in perspective because, folks, if you have never had the opportunity of researching this man or listening to the story that he documents in a nearly 400-page book, you really should. And Travis, you were so kind to write in the copy of the book that you gave me in preparation for this particular interview, and I'm going to share this with the audience. Steve, great hanging out with you. Someone appreciates who really gets it, Travis Walton, and I do appreciate your story because what you're about to hear, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not heard this story before, and Travis, I know you've repeated this story so many times because it's so important, but I encourage people to get a copy of Fire in the Sky, the Walton Experience, the best documented case of alien abduction ever recorded, which was made into a movie, ladies and gentlemen, in 1993. And the interesting part of this book that I find, Travis, is the actual introduction that's done by the screenplay, the producer, Tracy Torme, who I didn't realize until I read the book that that's what, the son of the legendary singer Mel Torme. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's totally amazing. Travis, start from the beginning. Tell us who you are, where you were, and let's talk about that amazing day, November 5th, 1975, which so many people maybe never have heard the real details of this story. Please continue and share with us this most amazing story that you experienced, something like unlike hardly any human being has ever experienced in the history of time and space.
Well, you know, I was just a 22-year-old logger working with a crew of 6 other men in the woods, and after a long day's work, we were headed home, and we spotted this light coming through the trees. When we finally got to where we could see the source of the light, there it was. There's this most amazing sight. It was astonishing, the power of that experience, just seeing this craft hovering there. It was emanating sounds that are really hard to describe. It's a mixture of really high and low tones. Same time, there was like some kind of an energy in the air, some kind of a charge. Mm-hmm. That, all the crew agreed that it seemed like something was about to happen, some sort of a feeling of something impending. But for me, you know, my immediate impulse was to just get out of the truck and run towards it, thinking it would take off before I got very close. I just thought it would be, you know, a response you get similar to when we see unusual animals in the woods. You know,
Yes.
They're on their way for cover. But that didn't happen, so I started to become more fearful, as did the crew. You know, they were yelling at me to get back in the truck. And when I got where I was looking up at it at about a 45-degree angle,
yes.
Their frenzy of calls and swearing and whatnot to tell me to get out of there and let's get the heck out of here, reached a point where the craft started to move and the sound got louder.
That's amazing, Travis. You know, this is incredible. And I just don't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to remind people what you're doing there. You're basically working on the Turkey Springs tree thinning contract in this area in Arizona, northern Arizona, maybe more specifically. You can describe it, the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest. First of all, tell us what you were all there to be doing. I mean, this was normal work for you guys as what? How do you describe yourselves? Loggers, or is that a correct term?
Well, you know, the news media is unfamiliar with timber stand improvement, so they just called us loggers. But, yeah, it was a project to, you know, sort of clean up after the actual logging operation and remove the damaged trees, you know, due to the logging and any diseased trees and thin out the remaining ones. Plus, the area was divided into strips where we'd cut up the material and pile it in the opening so that it could be burned in the wet season to reduce fire danger, make a sort of a break easier to fight fire at those points.
Right, and people need to know this, Travis. I mean, if they're listening, of course, all over the world, that here in Arizona, as in many areas that have a lot of trees and timber, that this season or just about any time of the year, if it's the dry season, we can become a tinderbox as we have, and people see fires all over the country. So you're basically thinning out so that there's a way to if they want to do a controlled burn later during the wet season, you have all the tinder, you know, the material that will kindle.
Or even if an accidental fire occurs, it makes a place where it's easier to fight it, but it's important. We got a major wildfire going in Arizona right now, and
wow. Well, I just wanted to set the stage, Travis, because people may not understand what you folks were doing there. But please continue, because this story, going back to November the 5th, 1975, folks, as I mentioned before, is the best documented case of alien abduction ever recorded. Our guest is Travis Walton. He's the person who experienced this. And describe, Travis, where you left off. Continue, please. You're in this thicket of trees, and this amazing craft is over you, and then describe what happens from there.
Well, it got louder and it started to move, and that, just was the last straw with my apprehension. You know, the guys yelling at me to get out of there. So I just kind of jumped for cover, and the nearest thing to hide behind was a log that was sticking up out of the middle of this clearing. In a pile of debris there, and I crouched down behind there and turned to run back to the truck, and I just felt this shock of a stunning force, and I didn't actually see the beam hit me, but the crew described it in various ways. One deputy wrote in there that the crewman was describing it as looking like a long blue flame.
Wow.
And, others described it as looking like a foot-wide ray or beam, or like comparing it to a bolt of lightning, a giant spark or something. But it was such a powerful blast that the crew panicked at that point. Immediately thought that it had killed me. They said they were yelling at each other, "He's dead, let's go." And, I've always, pushed back against the criticism of the crew, as being less than heroic at that point, because it was the only sensible response,
Well, absolutely, Travis.
Mike was responsible for the lives of the whole crew.
No, I hear you, brother, and let me say this, in adding, I'm sorry to cut in, but I just have to, I'm full of emotion on this. This is 1975, folks, and if I were experiencing what you experienced, or they experienced, it's some sort of stunning, like on the cover of the book, people can get to understand what this depiction is, It's this powerful blue light that to me looks like some sort of a laser of some type, but super high power. You bet I'd be running away from the hills. So tell us more. I mean, your crew is obviously shocked and panicked, but I want to hear what happens to you, because you basically numbed out? It's almost like a giant taser? You couldn't move, or what happened?
No, I didn't feel anything more, but the crew described it as throwing me through the air so violently that they, immediately thought I was dead. And, John says, my body hit the ground like a sack of meat, like there wasn't a bone in my body.
Wow.
And they tried to get help from hunters, but weren't able to catch up with them, and decided they better return and see if they could help. And
sure,
Kenny says that his greatest apprehension in coming back was not that the aliens would still be there, because they had seen the craft take off, but what my body was going to look like.
Yes.
Was I going to be jarred and horrific,
Oh, of course. I mean, it's just like looking at the cover of the book here. Again, like it's like a large laser or a taser. And from there, Travis, your recollection is from the time that stunned you or actually took over you, how long in your mind was it before that you next described that you're now what? Apparently inside this craft. I mean, was it pretty much instantaneous, or to your best memory, was there like a blackout period, and then who knows how long it was before you...
Well, I was unconscious, so I have no idea how long
Well, then,
lasted.
there you go, folks. Unconscious is a state, right. You're not seeing anything or hearing anything, right.
The conscious period was brief, so I was missing for over 5 days, and so I have no idea where in that period of time was this conscious period.
Yes.
I would suspect it wasn't immediate, but after some time that led to a bit of recovery, I still felt seriously wounded.
Weakened and emotionally overcharged. So in your book, I mean, that's why I'm recommending this. Folks, an open mind is so important here. And you have so many wonderful quotes in this book. This book, I must say, folks, is very, very well not only documented, Travis, saluting you and the authors, but you go through so many examinations here from every side of the equation. But here's a quote about keeping an open mind when it comes to facts and fiction. And I quote, "Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored." The quote is from the famous Aldous Huxley. And I think it's so appropriate here because Travis, I mean, you're the living person who's experienced this. There's people on both sides of the equation. Some will say, nah, that could never have happened. And then there is many, many people like myself that are firm believers that, indeed, this experience really did happen. And I'm not just saying that to you, Travis, to sound like a nice guy. I've always been fascinated by these subjects. And I got to jump in here. My experience with this for the audience is that way back when the Barney and Betty Hill incident took place, back in September of 1961, Travis, I think I mentioned to you, I spent time going to her home and listening to her story because like her story, your story, there's very few people in existence today on the earth that have even had as much detailed experience with the alleged, UFO abduction experience. So carry on. You're now what? Inside this particular craft, as we describe it, and what happens when you awake?
Well, I regained consciousness rather slowly. I was in a lot of pain, so I was in and out for a while. But when I finally came to, I couldn't really move much. I felt really just barely there, and I could see that there was a light above me, and the ceiling was close, so I figured I was on some kind of a raised surface, like a table or a gurney or something, which turned out to be the case. And the feeling of being injured, led me more to the, in recalling what led up to that, I may have been injured in some way. And I just assumed the crew had taken me to the hospital. But when I could finally focus my eyes and see more clearly, I could see that these vague forms around me were definitely not doctors. They were these alien creatures.
Wow, and that's a powerful statement, Travis, because, don't let me steal your thunder on here, and I don't know how much thunder there is, because this story is amazing. It's not sensational, folks. It's this man's interpretation of his facts, and, I look at the pictures here, and you keep, saying over and over throughout this book about when you're describing the aliens, the amazing eyes, very penetrating, but I'll tell you something, brother, that's pretty scary to me. I mean, I'm an adult, and I don't really like the word scary, but these traumatic eyes, these used dark eyes, obviously, I don't know how I would even respond to something like that. I would think that I would rather just be knocked out, but I mean, what's going through your body? So much adrenaline that you take a stance, like a defensive stance, if I'm correct in the book, and you're waiting. Yeah,
they were trying to approach me, or get me back under control in some way, but I was. It took me years to figure out that they were probably, not menacing, that they were actually just trying to help me, but I was pretty combative at the time and wasn't having any of it.
I would be very combative because, let me say this, Travis, reading your background, you're no couch potato. I mean, you're a motorcycle rider, rodeo, you're a guy that knows the outdoors, hunting. So like any guy, and I'm not putting you at any different level. I'm just saying that you're a guy that if somebody's going to approach you with harm, you're just not going to sit there and take it. But let's go back to the description of these beings, because that's so fascinating to me. Small, but you described them as having like orange suits that if you touched near their bodies, it was almost like what? They were like a little fleshy and no seams, no buttons, just like almost to the point like they were like, could they have been like robots or something? Who knows, right? It's just weird.
Well, yeah, I've heard all kinds of theories. I just know what I perceive.
Sure.
People say, did they seem like robots? And I say, well, if you could create a creature that could stand in for a living being, if you had that kind of technology, I doubt it would whir and jerk and look mechanical. It would be fully capable of serving the purpose. So, they look like living beings to me. Now, there's a variety of reports from other people saying that alien beings are similar to this, and they call them grays nowadays. But back then, I don't know if they had such a term.
They did not, which is amazing. So now let's go back to the movie Fire in the Sky, which exactly took the Hollywood side of the equation here. And, let me say this, folks. Watching the movie Fire in the Sky, I don't want to take Travis's thunder away, but D.B. Sweeney is, of course, playing you, as you know better. You were there through the whole, filming of this and the advisor on this. But, Travis, I have to say this in all candidness. The last 10 minutes or 5 minutes of that movie bothered me so much that I actually don't want to watch that movie by myself, even today at 62 years of age, because the description in the movie made those aliens look out to be extremely strange, sinister, and you fill in the blanks. I mean, I think they took a lot of liberty in the movie.
It evokes the feelings that I went through. I was terrified at their appearance. This was something totally strange and terrifying to me, and I, too, don't watch the movie,
Oh, yeah. It's not a very friendly movie. Yeah.
I see, I've been at events where they show clips of it, and I catch myself not breathing,
Of course. You're the person that this is all about. And continuing about you, Travis Walton is our guest, ladies and gentlemen. He's spending time, and believe me, Travis, I really appreciate this. His book, which is really just a small part of this whole story, but a well-documented book, Fire in the Sky, The Walton Experience, the best documented case of alien abduction ever recorded. Yes, he is the author. And let's get a little quote in here, because I remember interviewing this guy, like you remember, I'm sure. Dr. J. Allen Hynek says, and I quote, "A UFO adventure story that has already become one of the most celebrated. I would recommend the book and read from cover to cover." And, Dr. Hynek was interesting for many people that don't know. He was also got a little bit part in the Close Encounters of the Third Kind, but he's an amazing guy. So you had a little experience talking to Dr. Hynek, I'm sure?
Oh, yeah, and he became a staunch supporter and was willing to, go forth to the media and express that support and push back against some of the ridiculous theories that the debunkers were putting forth. it's, there was a whole onslaught of accusations. This ran the gamut of, no way, this couldn't happen. It had to be, a lie or a drug hallucination or...
No, I don't think so. Right. I don't think it's a drug hallucination by any means. I know you don't. But let's go on from here, Travis. You're inside this craft, which alone would be just so terrifying. You see these alien creatures, beings, whatever you want to describe them as. You stand your ground, and they kind of scurry out of the room, and then carry on from there. What happens next, and what do you?
Well, I went looking for a way out, and it was rather amazing. I don't know. I'm assuming that what I encountered in another part of the craft was some sort of control to operate it, but it's possible it was something else. But it looked like something to either navigate or control the motion of it. Could have been just some kind of a planetarium or viewing station.
Yes.
But in trying to open doors and somehow find a way, it was an irrational sort of approach to think I'd just open a door and jump out, like I could drop to the ground and be back in the woods. It was probably not still in the woods at that point, but that's what I was trying to do in my panic, and that's when this other being came in. I mean, what I took at that point to be a rescue from some Earth-based agency like the Air Force or something,
Okay.
And this guy, I stopped with the resistance and was fighting back and allowed him to take me out of this craft into an area that resembled a big airplane hangar. Maybe part of a larger craft, but
yes,
there were other disc-shaped craft inside this area, and but he was really hurrying me to another location outside of that room, down a hallway, where he left me in the custody of some other human beings, similar uniforms, and they put me down on the table and rendered me unconscious. Some sort of a gas mask.
Yeah, you were describing the book here, and this is amazing. They look like muscular men and women with extreme, how do I say this, very definitive features, but obviously human in their appearance.
Yeah, well, some people, come up with the theory that these are really just the small aliens simulating some sort of a hallucination or a mechanical device to get me to stop fighting them to where they could get me back under anesthesia again.
Right. So the description you have of them, as in the book, which does a great job, like you're explaining, is that they looked rather muscular, a man and a woman. And the woman in the book that we're reading here, the Fire in the Sky book, it shows some sort of like an oxygen mask. And then you say she or he rendered you unconscious. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, Travis, I'm thinking... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm just curious. You also described this chair inside the craft. And then, to me, this is a beautiful part of this story because we love astronomy. So you're saying that somehow throughout this experience, where this chair, what may have been like a control seat with these fixtures like a joystick or some kind of throttle, you actually got to see the entire heavens from in there, as if the whole chair was floating, as if you're outside in this big planetarium? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, from that point of view, it did simulate the appearance of being surrounded by stars, and it was. That's not what I was looking for. I wanted a way out, and
oh, you bet! I'd want to be out of there fast, like 1, 2, 3, and get me the hell out of here. Of course.
It was disorienting to be surrounded by this star field that would move in unison in response to operating these controls, and so I was scared out of continuing with that.
Yes. So then you see yourself in some sort of like hangar, as if you got out of the little craft, you were guided out by these alleged human-like looking creatures or people, whatever. And then from there, describe what happened from there. I mean, this is even more amazing as we hear this story.
Well, I looked around briefly. The ceiling kind of curved down into one wall, so it was kind of like an arc. But
yes.
A light much brighter than it was inside there. It was rather dim and claustrophobic inside the craft, but outside it seemed quite a bit like sunlight. So, it was either fixtures that simulated sunlight or it was actually sunlight shining through translucent windows, not transparent. I couldn't see outside at that point. But
wow. We've heard this, Travis, described many times by abductees that inside these craft, it seems as if there is some sort of a way to make solid metal, like aluminum, be translucent. And that, in essence, we've heard this before, but maybe that's what you were seeing. Who knows? I mean, traveling through time and space, you may have well had the technology shown to you. And of course, you're not there to take notes. You were just, and I keep hearing this, and ladies and gentlemen, listen very closely to what Travis is saying. He is trying to find a way to get the hell out of there. That's the main theme here. You weren't there to take notes. You were trying to find, it's a human nature. You wanted to survive. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. I just, wanted to escape. I was I was hysterical. I was just, out of control with fear. And, there are people who, act like, well, I wouldn't be that scared, I just...
Oh, really? Yeah.
Ask logical questions, but you'd have to be there.
Just watch Fire in the Sky, ladies and gentlemen, and not that Travis needs the royalties from this movie. I keep saying this again and again, and I'm not kidding. I've seen a lot in my life. Travis has seen a lot more in his life than I've seen with his. And we're here today to be respectful of his story. And, of course, the audience is entitled to their opinions on this. But if you want to really get the shockwave out of this, I mean, that whole movie, the rendition, of course, that Tracy Torme has put into on the screen, the screenplay by Tracy Torme, Fire in the Sky, 1993 movie, I would suggest that people see it to see what the version is that Hollywood's come up with. So ending this and moving on because of our time here today, Travis, then describe what happens, because you find yourself later in the conversation on a roadside near Heber, Arizona, and for your recollection, you could have been gone an hour, but people are saying no. Once you're recovered by family, you were gone 5 days. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I was still, in a pretty fragile condition emotionally, but the memory of what had happened to me, and then facing all these accusations, this onslaught of criticism was just ridiculous. The theories were falsifiable on the face of it, and all these debunker theories, in a way, wind up amounting to a perverse sort of endorsement, because by virtue of the fact that they were all solidly disproven as impossible, every way they try to explain it away, it just adds to the evidence for it. And Dr. Harder made the observation that if you had 6 people witnessing a murder in an American court of law, that would be sufficient for the death penalty.
You're exactly right.
And that's without lie detectors. But when everybody passes multiple lie detector tests, suddenly that evidence isn't enough because it involves something so strange.
Well, as you know, in a criminal case, beyond a reasonable doubt, right? And this is interesting to bring into the picture as Travis is talking about the debunkers. Another great quote, which is right in the preface here, and this one I quote, here it is: "To perceive is to suffer," end of quote. That's from the great Aristotle. So, not only are you going through the traumatic experience, your actual, happenings there. Now you're faced with what? Because people could have thought somebody murdered you, and that was the main concurrent theme, I guess. How did you handle this? Because now we're in 2018. It's a long time ago, Travis. I mean, it must have been some of the most difficult years of your life, correct?
Yeah, it was really, a hard way to go for years, to go out and have people look at you like that and hear the rumors that were said, and absurd, sorts of claims that people would make, that, of course, one one by one. You shoot them down, you disprove them. But it was, really unrelenting for a long time. It gradually became less and less common as the weight of evidence took precedence, and I think acceptance has grown over the years in a worldwide sense. I've given talks all over the world, and much more. The evidence is taking precedence over any claims to explain it away, that there was some seismic activity under the ground there, and it discharged some sort of unusual electric
I don't think
phenomena
so.
that electrified my brain. I mean, every theory that you can possibly come up with was awesome.
No, I mean, it's amazing, Travis. And again, you're a speaker around the world. You can go to Travis Walton's website, directly by Googling him, of course, and our direct interview here on the Dr. Sky Show goes links in direct to him. But again, this man's not doing this. And again, I'm a defender of you because of what I consider to be my open mind. And I'm hoping that so many people listening...
An open mind is the important thing. And all I ask is have an open mind. Take a look at the evidence before.
Absolutely,
Travis. Everything.
Hey, buddy, I'm in your court, and not for any reason. Travis is not paying me money to do this, nor am I paying him money.
Not.
This is he and I met, as I said, we saw each other across the auditorium there, and he walked over, I walked over, and I said, "Hi, I'm Steve, and you're Travis, and hey, this is cool." But let me say this, folks. Here's a book that deserves the open mind that we talked about here. And Travis, now let me conclude here because I only have a few more minutes. I want to get your take on this. Having had one of the most amazing experiences in the world that probably very few human beings have ever had, and the book describes the details greater than this interview, what's your take on life in the universe, the probability of this existing, and from your chair, who and where do you think these beings were from? I mean, they never spoke with you once, no telepathic communication whatsoever. What's your take on the universe filled with life? Where do you think this particular incident and these beings came from? Any conclusion to that?
Well, back when this happened, the debunkers were fond of saying, well, even if there is life somewhere else in the universe, they could never find us. We'd be like a grain of sand on the far side of the earth. You'd never find that one grain. They would never find us. But on the contrary, from here, with our, relatively speaking, primitive technology, the Hubble telescope, Kepler telescope,
you bet.
Looking out into the universe, the estimations of the number of habitable planets has grown enormously. The old Drake equation, they didn't even know back then if every star had any planets, let alone the conclusion that NASA recently announced is that it's a virtual certainty now that just about every star has about a dozen planets.
Yes.
So the number of habitable planets in the universe is just vastly greater than anybody ever estimated before. And Michio Kaku was saying, people keep assuming that these civilizations would be maybe a few hundred years ahead of us, but based on the age of these star systems, they could be literally millions of years ahead of us.
Of course.
So for these, know-it-alls to say, well, that's impossible, they can't get there that fast, or something of that nature, is really presumptuous and arrogant and absurd.
Travis, I got to thank you for doing this because it's obviously, this is in your blood, this is your story. But listen, what was an ordinary day was no ordinary day. And going back to that day of November 5th, 1975, I know I was back in New Jersey. You were there. Obviously, Arizona is a great place. And people who don't know, this is a lot of open territory, folks. This is pretty desolate where this happened. It's not where you drive down to the nearest shopping mall down the road. This is and back then, obviously, Travis, even more rural. I mean, encroachment has come, and some of it can't because of the forest. But my point is this. As Tacitus said, and I quote again from your book, going through this experience, even the bravest are frightened by sudden terrors. Hey, folks, here's a man. This guy's a full guy. He's a hunter. He's done so much. He's been out in the woods. I don't think you frightened too easily on normal circumstances, but you defended yourself. But the more important thing is to keep an open mind about what lies out there beyond this great cosmos. And as an astronomer, my background, of course, isn't as important as your story, but I think we both are brothers in this story. that the universe is literally teeming, as you described before, back in 1991, 1995 to be more precise, the first of the exoplanetary systems, 51 Pegasi, was discovered having a planetary system. I believe, Travis, very strongly that the universe is populated. But one last question before we go. Some have speculated that this could be some sort of dimensional transport where actually what you saw was the future species of our own human race, maybe hundreds of thousands of years into the future. What say you? Is that a plausible idea?
Well, I'm open to all these kinds of theories. Who knows? You know, I think that it's possible with our limited understanding of physics that space travel may not be by Newtonian mechanics, that there may be some sort of interdimensional sort of a thing involved in travel.
Absolutely, Travis. We'll have to leave it there. Travis Walton, ladies and gentlemen. One, if you believe the story, and I hope you have an open mind, one of very few people on the planet Earth that has had an experience like this, and there's so many others that are documented. But let me go back to the premise of the interview. Fire in the Sky, the Walton experience, the best documented case of alien abduction ever recorded. Find his book on Amazon, wherever good books are sold, and link with us at drsky.com, and of course our Teen Talk Network radio show, the entire listing here of links to his website. Travis, if you stand by with us.
Amazon's not the place. My website's the best place to get it. Walton.com.
All right, brother. Then let me have you say that one more time, because I was doing the promotion.
The only thing you got on Amazon are used copies or pirates, maybe, but
yes, sir.
They're only available from TravisWalton.com.
All right, then I'm glad you qualified that. But stand by and stay with us as we go to the hard break here. I'm Dr. Sky, reminding everyone, and I'm sure Travis Walton would wholeheartedly agree, with great guests from the realms of astronomy, space, aviation, and weather, and celebrity guests. Right, Travis? Always remember to keep your eyes to the skies.
Yep.
And thank you, Travis Walton.